Clinton to account. Senator Rand Paul has been aggressively pursuing that.
Recently, you launched a campaign to hold Hillary Clinton accountable for her crimes. How are you going to accomplish that?
We're all for it. I think an indictment would be a good idea, followed by a prison sentence.
Joining us now from Bowling Green, Kentucky, to elaborate, Senator Rand Paul. Okay, Senator, you're maybe the first, maybe the only U.S. Senator who said that she should be locked up. Why do you say that?
Well, you know, I'm a big believer in equal protection under the law. You know, whether you're rich or poor, white or black, everybody should be treated the same under the law. I represent a lot of soldiers in Kentucky, Fort Campbell and Fort Knox. Every one of those soldiers knows they can't take classified information and have it on their personal computer, and they know there won't be any exceptions, that they will be prosecuted, they'll be put in the brig, they'll be stripped of their rank, and they'll be booted out of the military. And so I don't think it's fair to hold our soldiers, many of them enlisted men and women, to one standard and then say to Hillary Clinton, oh, well, she can do whatever she wanted. I think anybody else in this situation would have been prosecuted, including General Petraeus, who had a similar situation where classified information was not where it was supposed to be and other people had access to it. They didn't do anything to give him a break. He was prosecuted. And so, no, I think it's very unfair that Hillary Clinton wasn't prosecuted. And this is one among several reasons why I think that really her dishonesty should preclude her from really being considered for Commander-in-Chief.
Senator, why do you think FBI Director James Comey did not recommend her for indictment to the DOJ?
You know, interestingly, my own personal theory on this is that I think he wanted to indict her, and I think he feels guilty that he didn't. And I think that's why you got this long, detailed explanation of how dishonest she was. You know, she didn't actually lie to the FBI during the testimony, but she lied to the American people on multiple occasions. And he pointed this out in specific detail. And the FBI doesn't have to do that. So my sort of personal theory is that Comey feels a little guilty about not indicting her, so therefore he spelled out for the American people, so at least the voters can find out that she did lie many, many times to the public about whether or not she had classified email out there. You know, one of the classified emails that Judge Napolitano has pointed out was the schedule for Ambassador Stevens in the last 2 days of his life. You can understand why, you know, Ambassador Stevens wouldn't have wanted the jihadist to know where he was, when he was, and why that was inexcusable that Hillary Clinton would put that out there and not put it in a secure place.
Do you think intent mattered? I mean, we had been hearing up until the Comey decision that intent didn't matter. So it didn't really matter if she intended to send the classified or receive classified. It mattered that it actually happened. Apparently, Comey says intent mattered in this case.
Well, you know, there's sort of a technical legal detail, but a lot of laws you have to have intent. This particular law, you have to show gross negligence. So you don't have to show intent. You could just be extremely careless.
Wasn't she?
Yeah, that's right.
Wasn't she?
That's exactly what Comey said she was, extremely careless. And so for many of us who aren't lawyers but do believe that words mean something, how is extremely careless different than grossly negligent? So, yes, I think she did violate the statute. But more importantly, she showed that her convenience was more important than national security, and that to me is inexcusable and goes to a great deal of her judgments that I think show her not fit to be president.
Well, you know, you say the term is above the law. Is she above the law?
I think often the Clintons appear to be. For example, Bill Clinton made millions of dollars giving speeches that had business before the Secretary of State. So one business wanted to sell electronics to Iran in violation of the sanctions. Bill Clinton got $750,000 from them. At the same time, Hillary Clinton was deciding whether or not she would let them sell things to Iran. Same way with the uranium company. Bill Clinton got I think $750,000 from a bank that was negotiating the purchase of a North American uranium company. Just so happens Hillary Clinton had to vote on that also. So the conflict of interest just goes on, and I think it's indictable. I think she should be in prison for it. But short of that, I think every voter in the country needs to know that the Clintons are in it for themselves. They're in it to make money, and they will make hundreds of millions of dollars if she gets in the White House, because they will sell themselves to the highest bidder. Every voter in America should know that, and they should make a sincere judgment on whether or not you want somebody who's in it for enriching themselves or someone who actually would defend the country.
No doubt. Senator, there's some, let's call it this, there's some potential breaking news out there. Julian Assange, who heads WikiLeaks, says there are some emails that pretty much tie Hillary Clinton to knowing about some weapons that may have been going through Libya to some of the ISIS fighters. Let's take a listen to what you asked her back in 2013 Benghazi hearing.
It's been in news reports that ships have been leaving from Libya and that they may have weapons. And what I'd like to know is the annex that was close by, were they involved with procuring, buying, selling, obtaining weapons? And were any of these weapons being transferred to other countries, any countries, Turkey included?
Well, Senator, you'll have to direct that question to the agency that ran the annex. And I will see what information is available. And
you're saying you don't know?
I do not know. I don't have any information on that.
Now, if WikiLeaks, in fact, does have emails proving that she did know, what does that mean to you?
It's a felony to lie to Congress. You can get 5 years in prison. And we can't continue to say that the Clintons are above the law. I do believe that the CIA annex in Benghazi was procuring weapons, some of them to get them away from the jihadists in Libya, but some of it to ferry those weapons through Turkey into Syria. There have been many, many first-hand accounts. New York Times, London Times, Washington Times have all reported upon this. I know for a fact that the current Secretary of State is very aware of what the CIA is doing, and I can't reveal what I've heard from him, but I can tell you that he's aware of what the CIA is doing in Syria, and I find it hard to believe that Hillary Clinton, who all the news reports have said she was the biggest advocate for arming the Islamic rebels in Syria, many of whom turned out to be not only enemies of ours, some of them may have turned out to be ISIS, but some of them also turned out to be enemies of Israel as well.
All right, Senator, we're going to have to leave it there, and we will be waiting to see if WikiLeaks does, in fact, have those emails that tie her to knowledge of what you just, the question you just asked her, where she said had no knowledge. Senator Paul, thank you very much.
Director Mueller, can you state with confidence that the Steele dossier was not part of Russia's disinformation campaign?
No, as I said in my opening statement, that part of the building of the case predated me, and by at least 10 months.
Yeah, I mean, Paul Manafort's alleged crimes regarding tax evasion predated you. You had no problem charging them. And matter of fact, this Steele dossier predated the Attorney General, and he didn't have any problem answering the question. When Senator Cornyn asked the Attorney General the exact question I asked you, Director, the Attorney General said, and I'm quoting, "No, I can't state that with confidence." And that's one of the areas I'm reviewing. I'm concerned about it, and I don't think it's entirely speculative. Now, if something is not entirely speculative, then it must have some factual basis, but you identify no factual basis regarding the dossier or the possibility that it was part of the Russia disinformation campaign. Now, Christopher Steele's reporting is referenced in your report. Steele reported to the FBI that senior Russian foreign ministry figures, along with other Russians, told him that there was, and I'm quoting from the Steele dossier, extensive evidence of conspiracy between the Trump campaign team and the Kremlin. So here's my question. Did Russians really tell that to Christopher Steele, or did he just make it all up and was he lying to the FBI?
Let me back up a second, if I could, and say, as I said earlier, with regard to the Steele, that's beyond my purview.
No, it is exactly your purview, Director Mueller, and here's why. Only one of two things is possible, right? Either Steele made this whole thing up and there were never any Russians telling him of this vast criminal conspiracy that you didn't find, or Russians lied to Steele. Now, if Russians were lying to Steele to undermine our confidence in our duly elected president, that would seem to be precisely your purview, because you stated in your opening that the organizing principle was to fully and thoroughly investigate Russia's interference. But you weren't interested in whether or not Russians were interfering through Christopher Steele. And if Steele was lying, then you should have charged him with lying like you charged a variety of other people, but you say nothing about this in your report.
Well,
Meanwhile, Director, you're quite loquacious on other topics. You write 3,500 words about the June 9 meeting between the Trump campaign and Russian lawyer Veselnitskaya. You write on page 103 of your report that the president's legal team suggested, and I'm quoting from your report, that the meeting might have been a setup by individuals working with the firm that produced the Steele reporting. So I'm going to ask you a very easy question, Director Mueller. On the week of June 9, who did Russian lawyer Veselnitskaya meet with more frequently? The Trump campaign or Glenn Simpson, who was functionally acting as an operative for the Democratic National Committee?
Well, what I think is missing here is the fact that this is under investigation elsewhere in the Justice
I get
Department.
that, Director.
And if I can finish, sir, and consequently it's not within my purview, Department of Justice and FBI should be responsive to questions on this particular issue.
It is absurd to suggest that a operative for the Democrats was meeting with this Russian lawyer the day before and the day after the Trump Tower meeting, and yet that's not something you referenced. Now, Glenn Simpson testified under oath he had dinner with Veselnitskaya the day before and the day after this meeting with the Trump team. Do you have any basis, as you sit here today, to believe that Steele was lying?
As I said before, and I'll say again, it's not my purview. Others are investigating what you
So it's not your purview to look into whether or not Steele's lying. It's not your purview to look into whether or not anti-Trump Russians are lying to Steele. And it's not your purview to look at whether or not Glenn Simpson was meeting with the Russians the day before and the day after you write 3,500 words about the Trump campaign meeting. So I'm wondering how these decisions are guided. I look at the Inspector General's report. I'm citing from page 404 of the Inspector General's report. It states, Page stated, Trump's not ever going to be president, right? Right. Strzok replied, no, he's not. We'll stop it. Also in the Inspector General's report, there's someone identified as attorney number 2. Attorney number 2, this is page 419, replied, hell no, and then added, viva la resistance. Attorney number 2 in the Inspector General's report and Strzok both worked on your team, didn't they?
Pardon me? Can you ask?
They both worked on your team, didn't they?
I know. I heard Strzok. Who else were you talking about?
Attorney number 2 identified in the Inspector General's report.
Okay. And the question was?
Did he work for you? The guy who said viva la resistance.
Peter Strzok worked for me for a period of time. Yes.
Yeah, but so did the other guy that said viva la resistance. And here's what I'm kind of noticing, Director Mueller. When people associated with Trump lied, you threw the book at him. When Christopher Steele lied, nothing. And so it seems to be that when Glenn Simpson met with Russians, nothing. When the Trump campaign met with Russians, 3,500 words. And maybe the reason why there are this discrepancies in what you focused on is because the team was so biased,
time of the gentleman has expired.
Pledged to stop Trump.